Whenever we hear about the great ancient empires, we can't help but imagine a vast army of warlords and kings. Although these people existed several millennia ago, at the end of the day, they're all still human, right? Were there any secret emergency rooms that never saw the light of day? Or did the warriors have super thick skin and superhuman healing tendencies? Unfortunately, as much as we wish this was true, because then history could have been a bit more fun, it's not. However, that's why here at History Unfolded, we research questions that keep you up and find out all the gritty details. So what's your theory about it? Now, we're not just talking about world wars, we're going way back into the ancient times when men had nothing but spears. But surely, as time passed, weapons improved and soldiers had shields to protect them. Sadly, Captain America's the only man with a shield who's invincible. All the Greek and Roman warriors and even the Vikings took hit after hit and returned home wounded like dogs. During ancient times, humans never waited around for a motive to go to war. These men received training since they were kids, so for most of them, being a soldier was the only thing they knew how to do. These warriors would invade surrounding lands and loot them, just because they wanted more power. How else do you think all the great empires were built? Just huge armies ready to take a human life at any given moment, if that meant that they had control over more areas than their enemies. Now, unless these soldiers and warlords were multiplying like bacteria, it doesn't make sense. How in every history book these battles and invasions never seemed to end. All these ancient soldiers would come back after fighting for hours and resort to happy plants or drugs, as most of us call them, to recover from their wounds. However, the movies only show women using a concoction of healing ointments and putting them all over the wounds of these young men. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. Many people have spent ages trying to research why these soldiers never seemed to suffer from any mental health symptoms of PTSD. Considering the amount of bloodshed and trauma they witnessed, their lives would have altered forever, but under the covers, something else was being altered. It turns out that all these soldiers were using mind-altering drugs as crutches to get over the lingering effects of battles. Our history has always shown the use of drugs for medicinal and religious purposes, but never for recreational use. So the next time anyone you know doesn't seem to understand why Gen Z is obsessed with microdosing and self-medicating with psychedelics, show them this video. All these Greek, Roman, Indian and Norse warriors would use happy plants and laughing mushrooms to get over the traumatic effects of the war. So these soldiers made a huge discovery over thousands of years ago that some drugs can help you overcome mental adversities. Scientists today are only just catching up and seeing evidence of how these recreational drugs can be so healing in nature. Now you're wondering what these drugs were and how they were available so readily. Well, unfortunately, ancient times didn't have the same culture that we do. Their older generations wouldn't look down on the young soldiers and simply label them junkies and criminalize them. The truth is that the elders might have done way more drugs than the warriors. In the Mediterranean, there were a ton of mind-altering drugs available, and there was a world-around international drug trade going on back then. Archaeologists have found evidence supporting all this, dating all the way back to 1000 BC. So after a soldier consumes common drugs like opium, hemp or mushrooms, they enter a trance-like state and let go of all their worries. We all know about performance anxiety, right? Well, some of these soldiers would indulge themselves in these happy drugs the night before they had to go into battle. It would take care of all their anxiety and make them feel good enough to deal with killing men left and right. On the other hand, another depiction of warriors using drugs for wars can be seen in the Vikings. Even the fan-favorite Netflix show has some scenes where you can see the Vikings taking mushrooms and turning into monsters more likely known as berserkers. These men would become so full of rage that they would be unstoppable. While they would be on these mind-altering drugs, they were basically killing machines. Some people think that this explains why the Vikings were the most fearful, because they had a secret weapon: magic mushrooms. The truth is, no matter how far back you go or which era you look into, every tribe and empire had their own types of drugs, and they would take them for healing, celebration, and during rituals as well. Instead of spending days in an ICU and dealing with terrible healthcare, using mind-altering drugs to heal faster from all the tragedy that war brought seems like a good option. Do you guys agree? This is why when you go looking deeper into your history, you'll find just more reason to believe that all of us either had similar issues or used similar solutions. Whether these mind-altering drugs turned all these soldiers into total heroes, there's nothing wrong with it. So if you need a good psychedelic trip to recover from war and adjust to life, opium sounds way better than lifelong PTSD. The few references to drug taking in the ancient world that do exist are few and far between. Where they do appear, drugs are mentioned in passing and focus on medicinal and religious aspects, passing hastily over any recreational use. Yet there was an international drug trade as far back as 1000 BC, and archaeology has combined with science to clarify a picture that seems to have been carefully obscured by ancient writers and their later translators. There were more than a dozen ways of altering reality in the ancient world over the Mediterranean, but two drugs dominated: opium and hemp. Careful investigations over the past 2 decades has begun to reveal patterns in the use of these drugs, previously unsuspected even by 20th century classical historians.